In your words, what's the difference between equity marketing, creative real estate, exchanging, and conventional brokerage?
Well, equity marketing is fun.
The first day on the job, Colby Sandlin was the broker, and he gave me a little thin orange book that said that there are 101 ways to make a real estate transaction, and cash is one. I took that home that night and I read it. I thought, God, what a deal! And I started off making exchanges.
I was in a city hall in Texas. I was in the Royce City Hall, and then there was a plaque on the wall which described how the original city hall was built and how it was financed, and that the city wanted to build the city hall on a particular piece of property. The owner of that property did not want to sell that property to the city. But what he said was, if you build a 2-story building and you give me the second story so I can live in it, you can have the land. That was done a long, long time ago. It was a creative kind of transaction where people got the benefits to make the deal work. One of the sayings we have in our industry, this particular kind of industry, is that people are more important than property. Property does not make any decisions. Property does not sign a deed. Property does not have a problem with the fact that the windows are broken out. People who has the problems, have the issues, have things they want to accomplish. So people are more important than property. We're out to solve problems people have, and many times we use property to do that.
The first deal I ever made was in 1988. I didn't even know I was an exchanger. And I had a guy that had an office building, or he wanted an office building in Colorado Springs. And he had a subdivision out in Teller County, Arabian Acres. It's all sold out practically now with a water system. He had 80 lots left, and he traded those 80 lots into an office building on South Tejon Street, straight across. And I didn't even talk about money to him or fees or anything, and I ended up with 8 lots as my commission.
Generally, people are much more creative when they're exchanging. It's often a case of, I'll trade you the property I don't want, and I'll take the property you don't want, because people are different. I don't want this property because I don't want to develop it. I just want some cash flow. You don't want your property because you want some opportunity. It's your investment. It's mature. You want some opportunity to go out and develop what I can't do, what I don't want. So it matches up people who wouldn't naturally come together.
A story that I love to tell people is that there was this huge junkyard, just an eyesore, nightmare. Okay, located in Chicago. Absolute piece of crap property. It was nothing but an environmental mess. Okay, languished on the market for years. Okay, it wasn't selling. Another guy comes along one day and looks at this and says, "I'll take it, and I'll take it at full price." Deal closes. Seller says, "Hey, I got to ask. I had this on the property for years. Nobody would even touch it at any price. Why were you so willing and able?" Says, "Well, I'm a recycling company. I recycle steel, and there's, $800,000 more than what I just paid you in steel, ready to recycle. And by clearing that land, I can quadruple the value of the land, which is the obstruction to it being redeveloped at a higher value." So because of that one person's expertise and his vision of what the problem was that was driving the interference of that transaction, he was able to step in, get all of his money that he paid for the property and then some, just recycling that, which in fact cleaned up the property. Then he turned around and tripled the price of the property and sold it.
One of the creative deals we've done recently, or that I did recently, was in a little town in Colorado. There's a multifamily property right downtown, right across from the park, that I liked and was interested in owning, and a lot of other people wanted to own the thing as well. So I happened to know the owner for a long time, and he didn't have it on the market. And so I talked to him about it, and he said, yeah, he wants to sell it, but and a whole bunch of other people are interested in buying it from him, but he doesn't want to sell it until he sells his liquor store, because he's already bought a house out in Oregon. And so I said, sure, why don't I just buy the liquor store along with it? That way you can head out of town at the same time. You'll have it all done in one deal. And he said, sure. So for his retirement, he got $500,000 of cash and $1 million note that pays out over the next number of years. And I went and borrowed that $500,000 and secured it all by the properties. So I was able to step in and not only get the multifamily property, but also get the liquor store, and do it without putting any of my own money in. And so all these other people in town were interested in this multifamily property, and they wanted it. And the difference was I went and I talked to him, not just about buying his multifamily, but asking him about what he wanted to do. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to sell his liquor store. So by giving him the benefit he sought, I got the benefits I sought. I wanted the multifamily. He wanted to get rid of the liquor store. So it worked out pretty well for everybody. And how did I do it? I talked to him. I asked him the questions. I treated him like a person, and gave him everything he wanted.
People like stories, right? I'll tell you a quick story. So we had a fella who had a shopping center. Actually, he had multiple shopping centers all over the Midwest, and they were all in great locations. And they were all fully leased. And he asked us to sell this shopping center down by St. Louis. And we had already had the listing and everything, but I wanted to counsel with him. I flew in, we met with him in his booth, we sat down at the table, and I started doing a counseling session. And I asked the question, why are you wanting, I said, you have all these beautiful properties, why are you wanting to sell? Well, we want to make a change, we want to go in a different direction. Really, but why? I don't get it. It's fully leased, it's well located, it's well built, it's beautiful. I have a beautiful picture of this thing. Well, it's got partners, and disparate partners, and we're trying to, maybe they want to move out and this, that, yeah. And I just kept counseling with him about why they really wanted to sell, because I couldn't understand it. It was doing great, it was making money, the kind of thing anybody would want to own. It was his brother-in-law. That was his partner. He goes, it's my brother-in-law and he's driving me crazy. Well, if you don't counsel people and you don't know what their hot buttons are, you don't know he says, I've got to get out of this property because I got to, I want to go to Thanksgiving dinner again, I want to go to Christmas and not, have this problem. So counseling will reveal the true motivations, and also will educate. It does two things. It reveals those motivations, and it allows you to educate people as to all the options that they have.
They wanted to buy this duplex, and the owner of the duplex had a really high price on it. It was probably 15% above the real value in terms of what we'd call appraised value. And he wanted 15% more than the market. Reason he wanted more than that, and he hadn't been able to sell it because everybody came in there was working on trying to get him to lower his price. But instead, I came in looking for, okay, how can I get him the benefits he needs, and I get the benefits I need in the transaction. And then I found out that he owned it with his wife, owned that duplex with his wife, and they had built it. He was an architect, and they had built it. And he had promised his wife that he was not going to lose money if they built this property, built this duplex. And he was holding out at a certain price in order to be not wrong. Not only just being right, you want to be not wrong. You don't want to be you don't want to be wrong with your spouse. So I knew what I wanted in the transaction is I wanted cash flow. And they were interested. He was interested in price. So I made an offer. The offer went like this. I offered $1,500 down, because again, price was important to him, not the down payment. And I gave him his price. And then he gave me a carryback mortgage against the property, which was 1% interest the first year, then 2% interest the second year, then 3% interest the third year, then 4%, went all the way up to 9 years, at which time it then amortized over 9%. And that was when 9% was the normal interest rate. So he got his price. I got terms that gave me cash flow on the property, even though I paid over the market value.
So I have a friend, a client, a good friend, member in our organization that owns a for-profit school. Okay? And he needed to borrow money. He had a certain growth agenda that he wanted to implement, and he needed to borrow money. So he went to the private lenders. That was the resource that he wanted to utilize. And the private lenders said, yes, we're willing to lend you money, but we need first position real estate as collateral with no greater than a 50% loan to value. So this particular borrower did not have the real estate collateral. So this person came to me and said, Michael, would you put up the real estate collateral, your free and clear collateral, as security for my lender to do a loan? And if so, we will compensate you, and we discuss the compensation. So what we really did was we created a lending relationship. Now, here I am, the owner of a free and clear property that's generating income. Okay, now this requires some trust, right? Because I'm putting my real estate on the line. But the borrower provided me adequate security, okay, outside of just a promise, okay, so that I had the comfort, plus I trusted in his ability to repay that loan that he was going to take out. And I received a fee on top of the rental income. So what we call that is a lease of equity for a fee. So, in general real estate, you buy a building, you have a tenant, you got Oregon Pest Control there, and they're paying their rent every month, and it's a 10-year triple net lease, and that's great. So how do I further monetize my asset? Well, you deploy certain real estate formulas, and maybe that's one of them, right? So I did that 6 times with this particular client over the course of the last 5-6 years, okay? And it took what was producing 8% money and made it 18% money. So, benefited the borrower, he was able to utilize that money. Benefited the lender, he was able to get the security he needed. Benefited me, I was able to capitalize on the fact that I had free and clear assets, and I earned a fee. Everybody won.
Take one of them was a client came to me that had was growing tomatoes in Sacramento. So we decided that, hey, because this broker in Texas had used the futures on a stock transaction, traded some futures in the stock for real estate, why couldn't we trade some futures on the real estate part? So on a farmer. So we said, well, why not? So we ended up with that client, and we traded, I'm almost sure, it's in my book, $2 million worth of tomatoes to be delivered over, I think it was 5 years. And they delivered, what was it, $400,000 worth of tomatoes each year for 5 years. So all of a sudden, we had taken the future crops that hadn't been grown yet, and it fitted what was Dick Reno called, which is a number 2 formula in my book, called the creation of wealth. So this farmer created wealth, hadn't grown the tomatoes yet. We traded the $2 million worth of tomatoes that had not been grown, but it was tied up legally and so forth, and had an established business. So all of a sudden you realize the whole futures market opens up an entirely different avenue. They could trade a rental unit for use 2 years from now. It's wealth that hasn't been discovered yet. So it just opens a magnitude of opportunities.
Well, I mean, a couple of years ago, I actually traded land for cryptocurrency. And the deal I'm working on right now is trading cryptocurrency back into a cash flowing property after it is appreciated. So, once I trade that into the property, a few years later, I refinance, that comes out as cash. So now I've turned essentially vacant land into sort of an intermediate cryptocurrency piece into a cash flowing, well recognized real estate asset back into cash. And it's going from a small amount to over $10 million.
I have a memorable client. I was in San Jose, California. He was a bus driver. His name was Dennis. Dennis drove a bus for the city. Dennis, I suppose, saved his money. I don't know how he got his first house, but he bought a house. And a couple years later, Dennis traded that house up into a duplex, again deferring his taxes and so on. And maybe 18 months later, and I was involved in these, he traded that up into a fourplex, a 4-unit building. And in about 2 years, Dennis traded that up into a 16-unit apartment building. Again, always finding people that had a problem or a reason to get out of what they were in, they needed to sell for whatever reason. Darned if 2 years later, Dennis traded his 16 units up into a 120-unit apartment building. So in the space of 6 or 7 years, he went from one house to 120 apartment units. He quit his job driving the bus. He managed his apartment building, just happy as a clam. But the leapfrog results of his investment, just by being creative and willing to actually move up and move up and move up. Hey, it's every man's dream.
We had a house that was not selling. It was a $100,000 house in Tucson. And it's what they call a mother-daughter. So it's a house with a little apartment stuck on the side. And it wasn't selling at $100,000. We had a lot of people that wanted to rent it. Not a lot of people wanted to buy it. We got tired of renting it. We don't want to rent it anymore. So I took it off the market, left the sign up in front, and I went inside to reconfigure the interior walls. And while I was in the process of doing that, a person came in off the street. He was a fairly new citizen. He was a senior citizen. He had never owned a home before. He says, I want to buy this house. I said, well, when I'm done the remodel, this house is going to be $115. And before we were selling it for $100. He says, I want to buy it for $100. And he says, but I have no money. He says, but I am a handyman. I can finish this remodel for you. And that would be my earnest money. That would be my equity in the house. So we wrote him up a deal for the $100,000. He was getting an FHA loan, which has very high requirements for the quality of the house. So he had to remodel the house to FHA standards. We supplied the materials. So he wasn't out of pocket on the materials. It was just his labor he put in. He completed the project, got the FHA loan, was able to buy the house, and using just his labor as the earnest money and the down payment. And he bought the house for the $100,000. He wanted to buy the house because his son was the manager of the auto shop on the end of the street, and his son can drop off his new baby at mom's. She can watch the baby all day. He can come home for lunch. At the end of the day, pick up the baby and go back home. And this house was in the perfect location. So we made the deal. We gave him a long escrow period, so he was able to finish the job, finish the remodel. We closed, and this house changed his life, changed his daughter's life that was living with him in the mother-daughter, his son's life, which was dropping off the baby, and they were watching the baby. Then it changed the life of everyone in his church, because their Bible group started meeting in that house because it was the perfect location. And it changed the lives of so many people. Everybody came out happy. The sellers came out happy. The buyers were amazingly happy. The whole community of friends was happy. And that's what it's about. It's about changing lives.
I gave them a list of 25 things that they could do to help me sell their property as part of my counseling session. And they looked at it and they said, well, 25 things. I said, look, I don't expect you to do 25 things, but check off on the list what you can do, 2 or 3 or 4 things, and let's talk about that. Anyway, they checked off 2 or 3 or 4 things that they could do. And one of them was add cash, because they had cash. They said, we can add cash. What does that mean? I said, well, you could give me your lot and you could give me $100,000 and let me go to a marketing session, see what I could do, see if I could get some offers. And they're like, well, we could do that, but why? Why would anybody do that? I said, because they want your cash. And he's like, I don't get it, you know. I said, well, let me go to a marketing session, see what I can do. So they gave me the authority to offer in $100,000 in cash. All right. So their lot was free and clear. It was $350,000. And I said, well, I have $350,000 lot and $100,000 in cash. I came back from the NCE meeting with 9 offers. They were blown away, as I said earlier, bringing them options. And they narrowed it down to 1 or 2 that they worked, and they ended up trading their lot into a medical office building in Indianapolis, less than 2 hours from their office. And they didn't add $100,000. They added $300,000 in cash. So they basically invested $650,000 in this medical office building. Now think about it. The lot was costing them, even though it was free and clear. They're paying taxes. They're paying somebody to mow it every week. They're having all of those expenses going out. And now they were getting 9% on that $350,000, which at the time you could get less than 1%. You were getting 0.9% at the bank. So now they're getting 10 times what they can get at a bank for a lot that was sitting there for a couple of years after their dad died doing nothing. Plus they took money out of the bank, $300,000 that was getting less than 1%, and put it into this medical office building where now they're getting 9% on that. So they're a total swing from money going out and not making any money on their equity to making 9% on $650,000. It was incredible. Well, and that's just the beginning. I mean, you talk about a memorable story. 30 days later, the guy who took the lot in, the developer, he called, he said, I took that lot in as part of the deal, but I really don't need it. Would you sell it? And I go, well, my sign's still on it. So I basically sent him a listing agreement. He agreed to pay me my fee to sell it again. And I got a phone call from another exchanger like 2 months later saying, hey, do you still have that lot? Yeah, would your guy consider putting that as a down payment on this new McDonald's, that I just built? Well, yeah, I think he might consider. So I ended up sending the new McDonald's, selling that, using the lot as a down payment. The guy who sold the new McDonald's ended up buying a $6 million CVS. I got $80,000 on that. I got $60,000 on the McDonald's. 30 days later, the guy who took the lot in called me. He says, I took that lot in. I don't really want it. Do you want to sell that for me? I said, well, I don't know. My sign's still on it. I took a lot that hadn't been sold in years. They couldn't move it. They couldn't do anything with it. And I did multiple transactions. I made $250,000 off that lot. And you know what? My sign's still on it.
Years ago, we had a number of years ago, 2004, I think it was, we had a hotel in Dallas, Texas. We had a hotel, a large hotel, and we had given a special discount for people that were going to be in the path of Hurricane Katrina. And we had 255 rooms, and the Saturday before the hurricane, we had 1,000 people staying in that hotel, about 4 to a room. And come Monday mornings, we had 1,000 people for breakfast, 2 people for lunch. They had no money, they had no bank account, they had no credit cards that worked any longer. So we had, my partner and I what are we going to do? And they were all coming to us and asking for help. And so we made a determination that we were not going to throw them out. That was before there was any idea whether FEMA would ever pay anything out to the hurricane victims that were in Texas, not in New Orleans, but people that came to Texas. We didn't know. So we got on the phone. We started calling people, telling them we need help. And we had other people get on the phone and start calling people. We had people show up. And we had people I know in the real estate business around the country began to send money to feed people. to set up computer systems so that they could reach out and find their relatives and communicate with their relatives. We had one person, said, okay, I'll loan you $50,000. I'll wire it today, and then you can pay it back whenever you can. So we had people that were around the country, part of our network of people supporting and helping other people, who contributed to my being able to do that with the people that were with us in the hotel.
Don't you think that's like the last image most people have of when they think of a real estate broker? Someone who would do that.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't think that, would you?
Yeah, well, and this is really unfettered capitalism. But the whole point is everybody who's involved in the exchanges win. They're all getting their objectives. That's how capitalism ought to be working.
If you just want to go sell people their first house, you probably don't need to know a lot about exchanging. But if you want to help people grow their real estate portfolio, their investment, really plan their future for them in a really very secure way. Yeah, it's one of the tools you need to have.
I love my job. I don't ever plan on retiring. I mean, there's just no reason to. I'm 64 now, and I mean, some of my heroes have been 85 and 90, and building, a new building or doing a deal, the week they died, I mean, you got to have a reason to get out of bed, Working with people, helping people is a good reason, and building wealth for your family, legacy, that kind of thing is all good stuff.
It's not about how big deals are or how much you did. Dollars that you reap and benefit in life are a matter of how many units of service you're willing to give. And the more units of service you give, the more money you make in life. So consequently, I think in a lot of ways, we render a whole lot more service than just a listing broker who's trying to sell something.
When you have investors come in and turn a crappy property into a nice property, you've improved the whole neighborhood, right? And maybe the other person who owned it couldn't do that. They didn't either have the vision or the money to do that. Someone else comes in and they do that. If you have a broker that facilitates these sorts of exchanges, they're essentially solving problems for people. And it's not just the people they're related to. It's often problems for the neighborhood, problems for the city, problems for the state even in some cases. So you're solving problems, making the world a better place, really, as a broker.
I said, I'm retired. I mean, really, I get Social Security and all that crap, But I wouldn't quit doing this because it's my form of creativity. I'm an artist, and that's what I like doing. I love my job.
Kind of a weird medium. Most people wouldn't think of real estate as an art.
Truly it is. Truly it is. Some of the best artists in the world are sitting right over there today.